Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. This is Anika Jackson with Your Brand Amplified, and I'm here with Bill Caskey of Caskey Achievement Strategies. You also have a podcast, which I was saying before we got on, I love to interview other podcasters. You are a 4-time author, so very prolific. And I'm really excited because I think you have a lot to share with us today on the sales process and demystifying that process. So Bill, thank you first and foremost for being on the show.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted. I can't wait because we just had a little warm up here and I think we're going to have a good, solid, robust discussion.
I do too. And your career has been in sales, working for other companies and corporations before you went out on your own. So what was it about sales that drew you in as a career choice?
Well, I'll take 2 minutes and tell you the dubious story, my start in sales. I got out of college a long time ago. I was 23 years old and I got into sales because my buddies were like, hey, you can make a lot of money and a lot of free time. So I'm like, okay, I'm in. But I went with a company that I didn't get any training. I didn't get any teaching, any instruction. It was basically just, here's the customer list, go out and sell $1 million worth of this stuff. And I didn't know what I was doing. And so I really struggled in my 20s. I had some addiction issues, which we won't go into here, but I can later. I was at the bottom of my game, not at the top of my game. And one of the reasons is because I didn't think I knew what I was doing in the sales process. And so I had one of those come to Jesus meetings at the edge of the bed at night. I'm not sure if Jesus was in the room. He might have been. But I decided at that point that if I was going to stay in this profession, I needed to figure it out. I needed to study it. I needed to understand the psychology of it, the spirituality of it, communication. So I took all these different studies and kind of overlaid them and came up with a framework that I've been teaching now for the last 25 years. It's modified, it's been tweaked, obviously, but so that was my start. And a lot of what I found in the content game back then, and really today too, is it's just all repackaged. It's the same stuff repackaged over and over again with different words and different frameworks and different charts. But it really, all of it, the old stuff had to do with what do I need to say or what do I need to do to get somebody to say yes? And I thought that was a terrible model because it puts the customer, it puts you in a one-down position where you're trying to perform for somebody to hopefully that they say yes. And I felt like, wait a minute, the prospect is the one with the problem. They're the ones with the situation that you're trying to fix. Well, why is it up to me to convince them? Why aren't they convincing me that they have a worthy problem of a solution, of my solution? So we flip-flopped everything and it really has done well for people. We've trained thousands of students and hundreds of companies in the process. So that's kind of how it all started. And that's what I say it was dubious because it wasn't anything that I wanted to be in sales from the time I was 10. It really wasn't that way.
Right. But you found that you could not only flip the script, as you said, but that it was something that you had a talent for and, dare I say, a passion at this point, that you've built a passion for this. But what was the transition that transpired to get you from being an employee and working for people, coming up with this process, and then deciding, you know what, I need to go out on my own and help other people learn the things that I've had to learn on my own?
Good question. Yeah, when I started to get pretty good at the sales game, given this model that I was using and the framework I was developing, and a lot of people were coming to me saying, hey, what are you doing here differently? How are you doing this? Not a lot, but a few people inside the company. And so at some point, and then I started talking to salespeople at other companies, and they were all struggling to get in front of people, struggling to close business, struggling to get the truth, struggling to get to the right level inside the prospect company. And I had some, what I will call magic in those areas. And so I thought, well, if it's good enough for me and it's helping me and those people around me, maybe I could make a business out of it. And so I went in one day and quit my job, and my manager at the time, who's still a friend, he said, great, I appreciate, why don't you come back in and train our people? So I had my first client, but that didn't work very well because, you can't go from a drinking buddy to all of a sudden a teacher who's trying to instruct them. And we did it for 6 months and they got some value out of it. But what I did find was that when I had other companies who didn't have a relationship with me, it was a lot easier to go in and instruct and train and teach them this new model, this flip the script model. So that's when I just decided one day, I got to do this on my own. I was tired of working for somebody else, although it was a great company. It's just that time in my life, it was time to move.
Yeah. Well, I think people equate sales up there with public speaking in terms of things that they're scared of and that they're afraid to do, and not realizing that in every interaction we have, there's probably some element of sales and there's
Right.
also an element of public speaking. So I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit and talk about some of those pain points that we all feel in business when we're trying to figure out, like you said, we feel like we have to get people to say yes to us, even though we're supposed to be there to solve an issue that they have. So,
Right.
so
Right.
how do you flip that language? And what are some of the things that you see companies do that you're able to go in and help them understand how to change?
Yeah. 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 Well, I always say that if the traditional sales moniker is not good for you, in other words, if you're a little anxious, if you're a little afraid, if you're feeling a little anxiety when you have a big presentation to make, it's only because you're not thinking of it in the right way. And a lot of my work with companies is on changing the mindset about what sales even is, so that then we can change our actions. If you just go in, if I just come to you and say, hey, Anika, here's 3 things you need to do. And if I haven't changed your mind, you may do them, you may not, they may work, they may not. And you're going to try 3 things and you're going to give up, say, well, I'm going to go back to my old way. But if I can change your mind around what is your role as a sales professional? What is the role? Why are you even in sales? If I can change that, and I'll give you an example of that in a second, then I can show up very differently. I'm not sweating when I have to make a big presentation. I'm not on edge. I'm not walking on eggshells like a lot of times salespeople do. I'm really fully me. I'm authentically me. Whether they want to buy from me or not, that's not my choice. My choice is how do I conduct myself during the process so that I raise the odds that they're going to say, yeah, Bill, you know what? Done deal. Let's do this. So that I'm not putting on all these clever closes and all these manipulative games that people play. And I still hear it today. I hear sales trainers still teaching the same old garbage they taught 40 years ago, garbage that didn't work very well then because it didn't position you properly. I always say that everything you do in the sales process is either getting you closer to a sale or moving you further from a sale. Everything you do, whether it's your emails, what you wear maybe, but that's inconsequential a lot of times because we're on Zoom. How you conduct yourself, the kinds of questions you ask, how you set up the call, all those things are either moving you closer or further from the sale. And if we can stop doing the things that move us further from the sale and start doing some of those things that'll help us move closer, it's not rocket science. It really isn't. It's not complicated. It's very simple. But if your mind is not right, it becomes complicated.
Well, that's such a perfect segue because I was going to ask you about that because I think to that point, self-worth, imposter syndrome, all of these issues that we struggle with, no matter how much success you've had, I think everybody feels that at some point in their careers and maybe the beginning, and then they get comfortable and get good at whatever their role is and they get some sales under their belt, right? And then they're like, oh, wait, now I don't know how to sell to the next level of people. So how do you combat those? And is that part of your system? Is this something that you've written about in your books that we can listen to, and learn more about on your podcast, how to overcome these issues and get into the right mindset?
Yeah, I think that that's a great question in terms of what do we need to be doing internally? Because we have always looked at sales as an external game. If I say this and they say this and I say that and they say this and then boom, they'll send me money. And I always feel like it all begins inside you. Before you ever make another call, you should look inside yourself and say, what is my role here? For example, I think the right role to have as a sales professional today is as a guide. You are there to guide somebody from where they are to where they want to be. You can't guide somebody if you don't know both of those places.
Yeah.
And so I always teach people up front to the first part of the process is really to understand who they are, who you're dealing with, what is their current circumstance or frustration. You can call it pain, you can call it needs, but I'm more interested in just tell me the circumstances here. What's not working, what's working, and then where do you want to go? Because the professional is a guide all the time and constantly guiding this person from current reality to future vision, to ideal outcomes. And that may or may not include your product, by the way.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can find that our product really doesn't fit in that here to there model. And sometimes you just have to leave because it's not appropriate for you to sell. You're going to try to sell something, but they're going to say, oh, wait a minute, I'm going here and I'm here now. How is this going to help me?
Right.
And so a lot of times I think we're selling to people we shouldn't be selling to. But once you find somebody who has a current reality you can help them fix and get to a new future, then how you position that is going to be critical. Are you positioning yourself as a guide, that has a roadmap, that has a vehicle of some kind to help them get to the promised land. And if you do, there's no selling to it. You don't have to convince anybody. It's really, here's where you are. Here's what I can help you do. You in or not? And it's not quite, I wouldn't use that terminology or that tonality. But the point is there that we have to get ourselves right. We have to get internally right, understand our role, understand this concept of detachment that I teach, which is I never want to be more interested in making the sale than the customer is in getting their problem solved. Yeah. Once I'm more interested in what's in it for me and not what's in it for them, I'm out of control. I'm totally out of control. And people sniff that out, don't we? I mean, we as buyers, we sniff out when they're really not all that interested in our situation. They are interested in making the sale. It doesn't feel good to us. And we'll say, we'll make up things like, well, the price is not right, or, I don't like the sheet of paper here. I was hoping for something a little heavier. They'll give us all sorts of excuses. But a lot of the reason is I didn't like the way you approached me because I feel like you're more in it for you than you are for me. But nobody will ever say that. And that's really the essence of why we lose sales, because at some point during the process, we goofed and we did something that caused them to move away rather than move toward.
Yeah. I love that framing. And I also think it's important if you think about yourself as a guide rather than somebody who has to make that sale, there is potential for they might not be the right person for your product or service, but they might know somebody who is, right? And so if you act as a guide and help them make the best decision for their end result, then that's going to build some trust and likability. And so we all talk about the know, like, and trust factor, right? so that will definitely add to them going, okay, I'm not the right person, but I know somebody who should be working with you.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that whole know, like, and trust thing, I know we throw those things around, and I like the model, by the way. I always feel like, okay, well, let's dig deeper into that.
Right.
What is, know, people need to know you. So that's where amplifying your brand comes in. They've got to know you even exist on this planet. And if you're not producing content that helps them see that you know what you're talking about and that you have some solutions, they're never going to know you. Likability, that's so subjective, but trust. How do you show up in a way, whether it's digital media, podcasting, or whether it's face-to-face, how do you show up in a way that elicits trust? And unfortunately, I find a lot of salespeople don't understand trust. They think trust is about convincing harder. And, well, they'll trust me when they buy from me. Well, they're not going to buy from you if they don't have some kind of trust factor up front. So I like that model, know, like, and trust. I think there's a lot deeper. There's a lot more deeper to it. And trust is a big part of that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that, because you've obviously been able to build an amazing brand for yourself based on your expertise, your organization, your podcast, all of the books that you've written. So how can somebody else who's looking at their sales journey, trying to figure out how they're going to grow their personal brand, perhaps to get to the point where people know who they are, going back to that know, like, and trust factor a little bit, so that they are the person that somebody wants to work with?
I don't know if it was a point in time or whether I just realized that I've got something to share. It may not be the world's most profound ideas. It probably isn't. They probably aren't. But if I've helped somebody to do something, then why wouldn't I share that information with my LinkedIn group, with my podcast audience, with YouTube? Why wouldn't I share it? Why am I keeping it in here when I can get it out? And that's one of the challenges that, I've been pressing hard on this personal brand button for about 3 or 4 years with my clients. People are very reluctant. They're very reluctant to personal brand. I'm not talking corporate brand. I'm talking personal here, where I have a client, they've been in it for 15 years and they're like the authority. I mean, everybody goes to them inside the company if they have a problem. And I said to this person, so why don't you have a YouTube channel? Why don't you have a podcast? Why aren't you producing and publishing? Well, my competition will see it. Like, oh, competition is not, what are they going to do with it? They're not going to do anything. It's not like they're going to say, oh, he's shooting video. I think I'll shoot video and say exactly the same thing he's saying. They don't do that. But a lot of times I think, we always, I'm going on a little rant here.
Please do.
We always talk about, oh, we're really into customer service. Do you want to help your customer? Oh, yeah, we want to help our customers. Do you want to provide good? Oh, yeah, we are a customer service company. And yet we publish nothing. We produce no content. Well, are you really into customer service, or are you only into it when it's convenient for you? And I think if we are truly committed to helping our customers, whether they buy or not, and that's a critical component, whether they buy or not, I think we need to be producing more content, I go live every Thursday morning at 8:30. I did it for a while last year, and then I've recommitted this year. And it's amazing. I just go live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And it's just 20 minutes of me taking a situation that a customer had, they brought to me, and kind of how we went through it. And it's amazing what kind of comments. I got a guy the other day who called after one of those and said, hey, I want you to come in and talk to us about working with our team after one live. Well, had I not done that, he never would have heard of me. I never would have heard of him. So this idea that by keeping things close to the vest, it's going to help us become well known, it's not. Today, you have to build your personal brand. And that does not mean you have a Netflix special. It might just mean that you produce something 2 or 3 times a week that people can read and say, oh yeah, I like what Anika said. I like that. It's good. Yeah, Bill, you know what? We need to talk to him more. Or I'm going to tell my 10 salespeople to get on his feed so that they can all get this too. You don't know who's watching or who's consuming. But if you're not creating content, nobody's watching it.
So what did you say to somebody who would object to, I'd love to create more content, but I don't have enough time?
You know it, man. You know the excuse. That's good. Well, that's just an excuse. And I call people on that. Like, no, you watch 3 hours of Desperate Housewives of Hollywood.
Right.
You watch Breaking Bad and you watch NFL games for 3 or 4 hours. Just reapportion some of that time. It's a BS excuse. What it really is what if nobody likes me? What if nobody shows up? What if those around me start laughing at me? I've got a guy right now who's in a company and he has started a YouTube channel. And every week he talks about trends in this business. And this business is constantly moving and evolving. And so there's a lot of trends, a lot of governmental influences, things like that. And I said, I know you're going to start this, Travis, but here's the problem. At some point, someone's going to say something to you like, what makes you think you should be doing those videos? And your whole wall is going to crumble down because you're going to say to yourself, yeah, just as I thought. Yep, I thought somebody would think that. You have to put the warrior outfit on and say, I don't care what people say. I'm going to give this 6 months and then I'll decide whether I want to do it or not. But we have to be impervious to some of those, what other people think. It's the whole fear of other people's opinion of ourselves. We got to get past that. A, they're not thinking of you. B, if they criticize you, it's probably because they're jealous that they're not doing it or they didn't think of it. And this guy started, and guess what? He started to book some appointments. He's only got like 15 or 20 subscribers, but he's sending it out via email. People are watching it. He had a call a couple of weeks ago where a guy said, look, we need to talk about how we can use you more. So again, it works, but you got to get past that barrier of resistance that sometimes happens. And I know I'm not telling you anything. You see it all the time too.
So preaching to the choir right now. The other thing that I love about the strategy that you've put into place and telling people to build content is that I just got a newsletter from somebody last week that said they had a podcast episode from 2017, Evergreen content, that somebody had listened to and come on board as a client, I think last month, and it was a 5 or 6 figure deal. I work with somebody for one of my programs that I listened to a podcast that he was on because it was somebody who was going to be a guest on my podcast. I wanted to listen to her podcast. And this was maybe 18 months ago. And I'd never talked to him. And I went to his website and started talking to him. And now I work with him. So it's not necessarily, I think that's the other issue, is people are looking for those quick fixes, those things that they're going to see the results immediately. But all of this builds time. You have to build a strong foundation. And people will show up if you put the content out. But if you're just sitting on that, absolutely. I hear the same thing with people who want to dip their toe into PR, but don't realize that means that they actually have to do the interviews. Right.
Oh, there's that. Okay.
So.
Can we get AI? Can we get an AI to do the interview for me? I don't have to show up. Yeah, and I think that's part of an internal issue. It's not about, I don't know how to use my phone. I don't know how to shoot video. Of course you do. It's that when I shoot video of myself, what's happening inside of me is that, am I really the foremost authority on this? Am I really the one that should be shooting video? And the answer is yes, because nobody brings your perspective like you do. You and I could be in exactly the same business and exactly the same problem we would be asked to solve, and we'd do it in different ways.
Yeah.
And some people are going to show up and say, I hate Caskey's way. I like Anika's way better than Caskey's. His way is awful. Somebody else is going to say, man, I love Bill's way. You don't know. And so this idea that somebody else is already doing it is a BS excuse again, because only you can speak the way you speak with your perspective, your background, your upbringing, that kind of stuff. And so those are excuses. I don't have enough time. Am I really the right person? You just have to give it a go. Give it a go for 90 days. Get in some kind of a cadence where a couple times a week you're shooting a video or even writing. So it doesn't have to be video, because I know video freaks people out, but it shouldn't. That's how you will help your people get to know, like, and trust you, is if you shoot video, you look in the camera and you have a nice way about you and you're helpful. You're helpful. That's how you build your brand.
Yeah. Tell us about your ideal client. Are you mostly working, because I know you talked about going back and doing some work with your sales team from your old company. Are you mostly working B2B teams? Do you work with B2C teams?
Yes, thanks for asking that. I have two clients. I have one that's a corporate client that has 6 to 50 salespeople, where they bring me in and work with their team on how to grow their business and how to implement this framework that we talked about earlier. And I also work with high-level sales professionals. I have a group called the $1 Million Seller. I've got a couple of groups of people who are high-impact performers who want to take their business to the next logical level. So it's two, corporate and individual. But the individual is typically $100,000 a year person or higher who has high upside potential. Companies are typically 20 million and above, who have 5 to, again, 20, 30 salespeople.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's very helpful, because that way, if anybody's listening, they know whether they're in that right range to work with you or not. But the beautiful thing is you do have the podcast and you do have the books that you've written. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what was the impetus behind writing 4 books. I just had a chapter come out in one book that was an anthology, and I have aspirations, but kudos to you for being able to put 4 books out.
Yeah, if the truth were known, though, I need to write another one. The last full 250-page book I wrote is called Same Game, New Rules, and it's about how selling is changing and about how the game is the same. You're out there to prospect and to generate revenue, business, but the rules have changed. Well, my next book will probably be New Game, New Rules, because I think the game itself has changed with the internet and with digital media and with brand building. It's really a different game. But I need to write that. I always say at the beginning of the year, this is the year I'm going to write, but it's hard. I mean, it takes a lot of time, but I'm not so sure that the 240-page book is where it's at today. I think the smaller monographs or micro books, the 30 to 60-page books, are easier to consume, much easier to write. And those two things together, I would say that's the future of books to me, is not the 400-page book, because people don't read like they used to. And you can take the 40 or 50-page book and turn it into an audio. You can still have an audio version of it. But my next book will be a monograph style, not a full-length 40,000-word book.
Oh. And that's something, though, that is accessible to anybody who's in sales at any level, who wants to still gain knowledge from you, but isn't necessarily in your perfect, target verticals.
Yeah. I've even got on the website, which, if you don't mind, I'll share. It's billcaskey.com, and halfway down below the fold, there's a freebie there. It's a checklist called the $1 Million Seller Checklist, and it's a checklist of 13 things. Might have gotten up to 15, I can't remember, but 13 to 15 things that if you want to scale your business, then that's where you would start, is look at this checklist and say, okay, do I have these things in order? If you don't, then that's where I would suggest you work. And we also have a webinar masterclass coming up here at the end of January. I don't know when this is going to be published, but if they go and download that manual, they'll get access to the webinar when we run it. So that's really a good place to begin. It's free, it's no obligation, and it's just a place to start consuming some of the framework that I believe is helpful.
Yeah. Going back to one of your earlier points, in that it's the way that we need to sell. In some ways, it's the same, not going back to the trying to get people to yes, right? But a lot of the strategies are the same. It's just the methods are different. And now we see those methods constantly evolving. You mentioned digital media, email marketing, and now we're in an interesting situation where third-party cookies are going away, and where for email marketing, if somebody hasn't been active on your email list for 90 days, and they have Apple or Gmail, you're going to get dinged. And there might be somebody who likes to get your content every once in a while, even if they don't acknowledge it. So I think as marketers and salespeople, we're in a very interesting time to figure out, how do we rise to the top, and how do we make the best of the strategies that we have, but use the new rule strategies as well.
That's right. I think that's a great point. It used to be that, I sound like an old man. Well, I guess I am. It used to be that you would just go out and you'd knock on the door, somebody would open it at a business, I'm talking B2B, and they would invite you in and you'd have a conversation with them. That ain't the way it's done today. You can still go knock on doors, probably going to get the police called on you if you don't show up with a suit on. So the idea here is that, well, how do I change this game? How do I turn this face-to-face game into a digital game? I've got a model that I don't have here in front of me, but it's the ladder of leverage. And at the bottom of the ladder, it's all analog. It's all hand-to-hand combat. It's making calls. It's showing up at networking events. It's emailing people saying, hey, do you want to get together for coffee sometime? It's all those what I'll call analog strategies. The next level up is what I'll call technology strategies, where you can go live on LinkedIn, or you can shoot a video for LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever, and you can say, here is something that we're working on. Here's some value. Would you like to talk with me? And now you can get that out. It's leverage because you can get out to hundreds of people rather than one at a time. And then the next level up, there's two other levels above that. But the point there is, if we're going to grow our business today, we've got to get out of the analog game and into a digital game. And that doesn't mean spending $30,000 a month on Google AdWords. I'm not talking about that, although that may be a solution. It's more, how do I, as the individual, show up in a way that I can leverage my showing up to get a lot of eyeballs on it? And if you're not doing that, you're missing an opportunity. And you can say, well, I'm too busy making cold calls. I wouldn't ever make a cold call again. If I have the phone and I have LinkedIn and I have all these platforms, why would I ever make a cold call? Why don't you create an atmosphere where they're calling you saying, hey, I want to work with you? Don't you think it's easier to close that sale?
Oh, yeah.
Taking somebody from they don't know you to they're going to send you a check? Of course not. That's hard work. Doesn't mean it doesn't work either. But I would look to add to my repertoire of channels of prospecting so that it's not all cold calling.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then that goes into, I'm sure part of your training also is it's easier to keep a customer that you already have than to cold call and get a new customer. So I'm sure some of your training methods go into that as well, customer retention. And I can tell you I use these in some of my classes. I have bad examples of, for instance, United Airlines. I used to fly United all the time. I got a little message from them in December, a little email, oh, it's your birthday month. Well, their offer was a free upgrade to premium economy in the month of December. If I booked something in December, I'm like, it's already partway through the month. That has no value for me. It doesn't make me feel loyalty to your brand. So a lot of companies, not necessarily individual salespeople, but they get it wrong. And how do you continue to nurture somebody who is already a customer?
That's right. I just signed up with a speakers bureau. First time I've ever done, a company called CMG. I know the owner and seem to have a pretty good system. They've got some really good speakers on there. The way it works is they've got, 50 people they represent, and it's on a website. And they wait for somebody to come along and see the speaker, and then they'll book the speaker. And I'm thinking, well, that's a terrible system. That's a terrible system. I said, are you emailing people? No, not really. We have a list of 4,000 email lists, but no, we don't really email people.
Oh,
really? You don't email? These are clients who might sign up for a speaker if they would know more about him. I said, why don't you run a monthly webinar where you spotlight a couple of speakers? And I'll be glad to go first. Spotlight a couple speakers, and maybe somebody that's got an event coming up in December of next year says, oh, I really like John Smith. Man, that would be perfect for our group. And now, boom, it starts. But if you're waiting for people to go to a website and read about a speaker, it's all very blasé copy. I put a video on mine, but a lot of people don't even have videos on theirs. But the whole idea here is not to bash them because they're just kind of getting started. The idea is you got to think creatively about how do we get our message out to people?
Yeah.
And it could be Zoom webinars. It could be a video series. It could be a YouTube channel. It could be a lot of these things that it doesn't cost a lot of money to do. Even client service, like you say, are you holding a monthly webinar for current clients where they can invite other people, maybe colleagues within the company or referral prospects to it? Is there an event on an ongoing basis that you're delivering value and you're asking them to introduce you to other people? That's so simple. Everybody's got Zoom or Teams or something. Why are we doing that? Well, we're not doing that because we don't know how to do it. We don't think we have the capability, but you do. You just have to research it a little bit.
Yeah. I love that point. It makes me think of, I do have an online program on branding, and I am in an affiliate coaching group where went to the first meeting last week, and now I have 3 meetings this week with different people who are part of that group. Let's talk about how we can help each other and how we can refer business to each other. And that speaks directly to your point of it's a little bit of analog, but mixed with digital because it's all via Zoom, right?
Right.
But it's fantastic because it opens up a whole new world of prospects to us and people who, I might know people who would be really great for your business and vice versa.
And that's what we're doing here. I mean, you're doing it here on the podcast. I'm going to promote the podcast to my audience, which is, 12,000 on LinkedIn. I'm going to send it to my email list. So you're going to get some action there. Yeah. I don't know if any clients will come. They may. I hope they do. But if they don't, but if you keep doing that over and over and have people promote this, you will end up with clients. You already have. So this is not anything that's like, oh, I never thought about that. This is all common sense stuff. But if we stay in the analog game where, oh no, nobody's going to buy unless I show up at their office or on the phone, it's just old thinking. It's just antiquated thinking. And somebody in your marketplace will be doing it the new way and they will eat your lunch. I hate to say that, I'm sorry, but they will generate business from your clients because they did that and you didn't.
Yeah.
So it's harsh. I know it's harsh.
Well, no, it's just the reality of, you want to be in business, you've got to take the steps.
That's right. The idea that if I'm in sales, all I need to know is when I get in front of somebody, how to act, how to conduct myself. And that's really important. But that's not all you need to know today to be successful. You need to know, what mindset do you have? What are your goals? What is your plan to accomplish? What's your educational strategy for your prospects? Do you have a video channel? All those things are part of it today. And if you're a salesperson listening to this, which I know some of your listeners are entrepreneurs who also run the company and they sell, you've got to get out of this single line thinking. I used to give people static a lot. I still do when someone says, I got to stay in your lane, got to stay in your lane. Well, what is my lane? My lane now is a 7-lane highway that includes video, podcasting, writing, emailing, and that's my lane. The sales lane is one of those lanes on the freeway. And if you're going to stay in that lane and not branch out and prospect in different ways, then don't be surprised when somebody else comes along and unseats you top of the charts.
Let's move to your podcast, because that's another resource that's obviously a free resource for people, Advanced Selling Podcast. So when did you start the podcast? We know the podcast's been around for about we're going on 21 years this year, but people really just started discovering them in the last few years. So I'd love to hear, you have guests come on your podcast. I know you have a co-host.
Yeah, the Advanced Selling Podcast we started 17 years ago. This will be the 18th year. And we started back when nobody really knew how to access podcasts. It was RSS feeds and so nobody could figure it out. So that's when we started that one. We're in the top 50 marketing podcasts on iTunes. We get about 20,000 downloads a week. I started a podcast, the Bill Caskey podcast. I should have had your help in naming it here about 2 years ago. And I bring guests on there. I bring guests on who I feel like complement. I don't bring sales training or coaching guests because I feel like I've got that handled, but digital marketing people, psychologists, communication experts. And the Bill Caskey podcast is, some weeks it's just just me babbling and talking about issues that I think are affecting salespeople. And a couple times a month, I'll interview guests and they will circulate the podcast to their social platform. So I just am a big believer in podcasting. In fact, I'm even giving some thought to starting a third one for an entirely different niche for VPs of sales and sales leaders, because I just find that it's a very intimate way to talk to people. It's good for we podcasters because I interview people that I learn from. You interview people you learn from. What could be better than having fun with somebody and getting to know them and learning something from them?
Yeah.
And I just love the venue. In fact, I always suggest to most salespeople, if you're at the top of your game inside your company, you should be creating a podcast. And I've had some people take me up on it and it works fine. But, then you've got another lane. So now I'm not a 6-lane highway. I had to open up another lane of podcasting. Well, but everything is figure-outable, as Amy Porterfield says, or Marie Forleo. I can't remember who says that. Everything is figure-outable. Don't have a podcast? Research it for 10 minutes on Google, and you'll figure out, oh, I could do that.
Yeah.
But again, it's an internal thing. It's that internal resistance that will stop you. It's not knowing how to use a microphone or hook up a TRS to a computer. It's not that. It's all the internal stuff.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the consistency. Before I started my podcast, I hosted a couple for clients and they had to, for whatever reason, one reason or another, pause there. So I started my own, but I wasn't consistent with it until a couple of years ago. And that consistency helps build up the audience and grow it. And it helps all of us share this information with a bigger audience. And that's what we're here to do. So be a resource.
That's right.
Yeah.
I would even say if we have a listener today who is thinking about starting a podcast and feels like they may run out of material quickly, which I know is one of those hidden fears, go interview clients or go interview people who you want to become clients.
Exactly.
If you're calling on VPs of marketing, have a podcast where all you do is, I'm not saying you, but if just go interview VPs of marketing. What are some of the trends? How have you solved problems? What do you see in your business? And what's your next thing? People will love that because they want to hear how other people like them are doing the work that they're doing. And that's what I always tell people, start with clients or want to be prospects and interview them. And now you get to know them. People will say no to an appointment for a cold call. People will always say yes to, I want to interview you to spotlight you. Who says no to that? Nobody.
Yeah.
So I'm always just trying to get people to expand their thinking a little bit,
Fantastic. Well, Bill, I'd love to hear, do you have a final thought that you'd like to leave the audience with today?
Well, I think in terms of the branding, I think we just have to say to ourselves, we have to have, again, that long conversation with ourselves, like, do you know things that your marketplace might bring value to your marketplace? And we all do. We all have things that we want to say, but we haven't said before. That's one thing that I found on the Bill Caskey podcast. I'm starting to get to the point where I don't care if my audience likes what I have to say. I need to tell them the truth about what's really going on. And guess what? People like that better. Because you're more authentic. You're not just waving some kind of flag. You're out there saying, look, this is why it's not working. But you have to look at yourself and say, do I know things the world would like to know? And the answer is, first off, the answer is yes. And then the question is, how do you package it in a way that's consumable, whether it's podcast, video, content, and start and just do it. And do it for 90 days, 6 months, and see what happens. If you don't like the results, stop. But you will.
Yeah. Fantastic. And do you have a favorite quote or mantra?
I have a prayer that I started saying last year. I'm not it doesn't matter. I'm a Christian background, but I'm not a Bible thumper. I'm just appreciative of the Bible and the Word of God. And one of the prayers it's called the Prayer of Solomon. I've modified it, so it's not technically the Prayer of Solomon. It's Bill's version of the Prayer of Solomon, but it's basically something like, Lord, grant me the wisdom and the courage to do what you put me on this earth to do in a way that pleases you for the people that you've put me here to serve. And I like it because it takes into account, what are we here for? Aren't we here to serve people? Isn't that really? Yeah. I don't care what religion, aren't we here to serve you? That's what you do. Anika, you do that every day through the podcast, through your work. We're here to serve people. Nowhere in there does it say we're here to sell people. It says we're here to serve people, and some of those people will give us money to serve to them, some won't. Now, I'm not giving all of my stuff to the people for free, but I want to keep in mind that serving people is the essence of this. And I find when I do that, the money shows up fine. The money shows up fine.
I love that philosophy and that verse. And we're cut for the same cloth. I believe the same thing. So,
good.
Bill, I know there are so many things that we didn't get to touch on that we teased out at the beginning, but we'll have to bring you on another time.
I've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed it.
Your next book out.
My next little book.
Yes. I'd love that. And thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome.
Thank you to the audience for watching or listening this episode of Your Brand Amplified with Bill Caskey. I'll have all of his information in the show notes for you. And I will be back again in a few days with another amazing expert to share their knowledge with you. Want more? Check out amplifywithanika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithanika.